Ooh,
Wait,
hello,
what? We're
everyone.
live.
No,
We're live.
don't say we're live.
No. We're live.
Girl,
We're not live.
We're live.
I don't think we're live. Hello, if we are live.
Box texting me.
you
Look,
are
man.
amazing.
And also didn't
we're
know.
live. Okay, great.
You've just got like Dalia
Oh.
like doing her fucking eyebrows, man.
oh my god!
Finish
I can
your
see on the
eyebrows, babe. No one's going to
screen.
judge. Good evening and welcome to our 100k YouTube subscriber. Well, it's not an edition of Tisky Sour. It's a special Novara Media Ask Me Anything. We've put an Instagram story up over the week, sort of asking you for all your questions to the Tisky Sour team, and we're going to answer them. I suppose that's how these things work. we sometimes answer your questions in the show, but they're normally related to the news cycle. So now you can ask us any kind of fucked up shit you want, and we're going to go for it. Aaron, we're live apparently. So how is everyone? I'll start with the questions. Ash, how's it going?
I'm good, man. Like Tottenham just scraped the draw at Stamford Bridge. I was expecting us to lose, if I'm honest. I'm here with my best friends in the whole world. I've got some rum. This is great.
Well, my brows
just
are
rediscovered
half filled in, thanks to like this situation that just happened. If anyone wants to know, I use the NYX brow pencil. Cool toned, creamy, very long lasting. But yeah, thanks for that. Dobbing me into the internet, Gary.
Can Aaron hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear, Michael, yeah.
Fabulous. Let's get some questions up. Gary is in charge tonight. He is behind the scenes. He's going to be picking your questions, which are mainly from Instagram, but also do put them in the YouTube as ever, because Novara is based on your kind donations, especially if you put in super chats. We love those. So we'll go to those, but hopefully we'll be able to go through a bunch of them and pick out a few. But we're going to probably, I presume, start with some of the ones that came through from Instagram. So we're going to see how this system works. Probably, as you can tell, we went live a bit before we realized we were going live. So the show is going to kind of build around you as you're watching it live. Luckily, there was nothing too compromising in the background. We're all in our own homes, but seems to be fine as far as I can tell. Let's get some questions up, Gaza.
From the waist down, Michael. I mean, I have yet to pull on my tracky bottoms. Thank God I didn't stand up.
And Aaron, you're too low in your screen. I think. Oh, okay. We've got a question. Isaac Palmer, 1992. Why is it called Tisky Sour? I wasn't there from the start. So the reason it's called Tisky Sour, it's not that deep and meaningful, really. We used to drink Tiskies. It used to be a show where basically me and Aaron would get a bit drunk and chat shit about politics. And Tisky was our beer of choice. Tisky Sour sounds a bit like whiskey sour, but with Tisky in front of it. We were almost considered. Go on, Aaron.
It was initially, I know I shouldn't speak, it was initially a bad show because Michael would drink too much. I mean, after about half an hour, there was quite a clear deterioration in the quality of political commentary because Michael was drunk. And I said, Michael, you're really good at this.
True.
You should probably consider not drinking, say, 3 or 4 beers that quickly.
I've got a celebratory Guinness
really
tonight, but I did realize it's actually, do not get drunk if you're trying to host a political comment show, because it is bad. Your questions get worse, your points get worse.
If Karl Marx can write 3 volumes of Capital completely hammered, you should be able to get through an hour show on a few beers, Michael.
I mean,
I don't know. I think these are very different things to do. Hosting a YouTube show is really difficult. Writing 3 volumes of Capital.
Also, Marx didn't have to worry about being sued for libel, whereas I kind of feel if we regularly threw booze into the mix, like we're already skirting pretty close to the bone. I feel that my "who really killed Diana" theories would come out. We wouldn't last a week.
Is it an excuse in court?
You know the Poppygate show with me?
Yeah, go on, Aaron. Yeah,
Poppygate show a few years ago. I'd had a bottle of wine that day.
Oh.
I wasn't pissed.
Still like the biggest section on your Wikipedia is the Poppy controversy. Explain the.
Yeah, I wasn't pissed. No, I wasn't pissed.
Explain the Poppy controversy for anyone that doesn't know it.
Yeah, no, I said that I think that the Royal British Legion has huge amounts of resources, and yet thousands of ex-service personnel are homeless or they're just economically marginalised. And of course, it was started in the aftermath of the First World War to never repeat the mistakes that were made by elites across Europe. And yet some would argue, including myself, it increasingly seems to be, has over my lifetime anyway, glorified war and militarism. And I think that's a really valid point. And I think, some will disagree, some will agree. But, if you're going to say something which is going to be controversial amongst some people, you probably shouldn't say it after a bottle of wine on YouTube. So, lesson learned.
But how it got, like, what you said and how it got distributed and, like, metabolized by the internet were two really different things. So I remember the actual point you made and thinking, oh, that's quite reasonable. And then, like, over, like, when it blew up, it was just like, Aaron Bastani says Poppy is a racist. And I was like, oh, shit, like, this is going to legitimately get him murdered.
Well, there was like a Pegida, the sort of German EDL kind of thing. Pegida UK, the guy who started that was outside my house the next day on Facebook Live, saying, come out. And then I was in the comments saying, mate, what are you talking about? Like, I'm happy to talk to you. And then he blocked me from talking to him while saying he won't talk to me. It was very bizarre. But anyway, if I hadn't had that bottle of wine, maybe it never would have happened.
So who else here has gotten drunk and then just become public enemy number one by accident? I feel like that's happened more times than it probably should have.
Yeah. So mine was.
Were you drunk on Sky Papers
oranges.
this year? No, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was unfortunately so alert. Not alert enough to know that I should shut my mouth sometimes.
Ash, I felt like you were starting a story then.
Oh, well, so I've done, so the day of the snap election, when that was called, it was the day after my birthday, and I'd been away with some mates for like a lads holiday in Marseille. And then suddenly it's snap election, you have to do loads of media. And I remember I was just oozing, sweating rum. And it was the setup that Sky News have, like on College Green opposite Parliament. And they put me up against someone, I can't remember who, and I was much shorter than them. So they stood me like up on a box of kit. So like the shot would be level enough and I was tall enough. And I was just absolutely hanging, still probably drunk. And they're like, so how's Labour going to fare now that Theresa May's called the snap election? I remember just thinking, terrible, God, because I felt terrible. And then the time that I did tweet pissed was when I'd come back from like a really nice day in the park with some friends and I'd had an orange lolly. And I was like, oh, it's kind of a cute photo. I posted it with 3 orange emojis, and I woke up the next day and people were like, she's a terrorist, kill her. And I really couldn't see how it got from A to B. And then I was worried, I was like, oh God, did I get drunk and accidentally post like a famous terrorist insignia? Oh, frightening.
Honestly. I remember seeing that and just being like, no, the world has I officially can't be bothered to actually try and manicure my image anymore, because no matter what I do, like there are people out there who are going to actually absolutely run with it. It's like,
share your most reckless opinion. Like you may as well.
I'm going all out.
The 3 oranges thing was the craziest instance of that. Anyway, sorry, go on, Michael. Go on.
Next question.
No, I was going to say let's get some more questions in. I'm wanting some more to roll in through the bottom. We've got a lot to get through.
Come on, Gaza.
Yes, here we go. I like the way it's. How did you all meet? Interesting. We should probably do this in the order that people joined the organisation. So Azza is the most senior member of Novara on the call, along with then Ash. So you should probably start. How did Aaron meet Ash?
How did we meet? Personally, was during the 2010 student movement at UCL. How we met, which was obviously a really important moment politically and personally, I think for both of us. I won't ventriloquize Ash. She'll talk about it on sort of how she interpreted it. Far more uncharitably, I think, towards me than I was to her. I was taken immediately by Ash, as any sensible person would be. In terms of politically, that then sort of develops over the next year or two. Ash is involved in various kinds of political activism, and I remember saying to James, she should come on Novara. She's great. She's very fluent talker, very original thinker. She's funny. And Ash wasn't so sure. I had to kind of bully her into doing it because it was live radio, and in a way, live radio is actually a lot harder than a lot of social media stuff, especially for an hour. Hour live radio is not easy. And then Ash comes on. Me and James start the show. Ash speaks after about 2 minutes. And after about 10 seconds, she's just incredibly fluent. And I just looked at James and was like, this is it. A star is born. It was like, Philip Schofield as Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat. I felt like Tim Rice in a West End musical. This was a sort of a new star.
I mean, so mine was actually quite charitable to you, because I remember meeting you at UCL Occupation, and none of us had slept very much. It was this like cold, filthy, occupied university floor. And I was taking care of the donations, which was all in cash, because we hadn't worked out how to set up a bank account that quickly. And I'd hidden all the cash at night above and behind the ceiling tile, which was loose. And you had to like climb up onto a sink and lift it up and put it over. And I could do that at first for a while, and then it got too heavy to lift above my head. So I was like, Aaron, you've got to do it. And then one time too early in the morning, I asked you, and you were grumpy and I was grumpy, and we just like grumped at each other a bit. And I was like, right, this guy is a prick. That's it. We're never going to get on. And then a few months later, we were in like the worst pub in Bloomsbury, like the worst. It's the Court on Tottenham Court Road. And it was especially shit then. I'm not sure if it's improved since. And we were there with a few friends, and there was this one girl who we were both with, and she'd sat down on like a stool, and this guy's jacket was touching a bit of it, and he turned around, started shouting at her. And then, because I've got no idea that I'm 5'2", like spiritually I feel much taller, so I was like, I don't care that I'm literally 18 and 5'2". I can like take this guy down. So I started yelling at him, and then his friends turned around, and they were like QPR firm. And it just got really, really bad. And it became it became very clear that I was just going to get my ass kicked by like these 5 football ultras, until I felt like a hand on the scruff of my neck just like yanking me out of this increasingly racist circle. And next thing I know, like Aaron's taken the place where I was standing, and then he's on the floor, fetal. He's getting like kicked and punched and all of this stuff. We like come out of the pub, and Aaron's like got all these grazes on his face, and he was like, yeah, the bouncers said they were going to kill me. But you seemed really like bright and bouncy about it. And after that I was like, oh shit, I've got to like him, because he's taken a beating for me. You can't bitch about someone behind their back anymore if they've taken a beating like for you. And I'm still annoyed about that.
That was bad. It was bad, because no, the bouncer, I was in a fetal position, they're kicking me. Also, it was quite nasty, and they weren't nice people, It was probably only the second proper fight I've ever been in. The other one was a guy trying to gouge my eyes out, and then my mates kicked him. So, if I was alone, I would have been really badly hurt. But yeah, this time the bouncers got involved. Right, the bouncers get in the way of these guys, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is all over now. They're saying, you have to leave. They're going to kill you. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the bouncers. So, but, all's well that ends well. It was fine.
We got a great media project out of it. But Michael, how did you get involved?
So I met you all first professionally, didn't I? I went to university with James Butler, so we were in student occupations together while you guys were in student occupations in UCL. But I got involved so I'd gone to live in Spain for a year when Podemos were getting big, and I learned Spanish by watching Pablo Iglesias's show La Tuerca, which was very entertaining. And I was like, Britain needs, we're a bigger country. Why don't we have a left-wing YouTube show? So then I sort of pitched it to the Novara team, and that was where we sort of set off. And never look back, my new family. And Dalia, what about Dalia? You met us all professionally first as well, or did you know people beforehand?
Yeah, like I kind of like had like mutual people that like knew people, like, and I was at Warwick when Craig, who is like one of the members of our team who does like articles and operation stuff. So I was at Warwick. No, my boyfriend at the time was at Warwick with Craig, so I kind of knew him a little bit through him. And I remember like really, really vividly, like the first time I saw a Novara video and being like, oh my God, like this is a really interesting, like cool organization, was actually when Russell Brand did that, like when Russell Brand has like wokening and did that thing about loving the police. And Aaron went into a car park and shot like a video, like which is like 11 minutes of him talking about like why we shouldn't love the police. And it was just like a really like, I just thought it was like a really like cool and like kind of, I think it was like, it went viral, right? And then I just thought
It did
was
really
like,
well,
I was
yeah,
like,
because of Russell Brand.
yeah, and I was like, okay, so there's like an organization that's like cohesively taking these ideas on. And it was also like, I can't remember like what year exactly, but it was like around the time when kind of like, I think it was like in that like middle land between like 2010, 2011, like uprisings had happened like around the world, and it felt like really cool shit was about to go down. And then there was like a wasteland until like 2015, at least in the UK. And it was like, okay, well, this is like something. And then Novara put out that they were recruiting for articles editors, and I applied. So like I'd kind of known of people a little bit, but it was actually that Don't Love the Police video that was like the first hook in for me. So yeah. Yeah. Do you still stand by that video, Aaron? Because I don't know if your position's changed on the police.
I don't think, I mean, what was I saying? I think he said stuff. I don't think police officers are workers in uniform. No, I've never thought that. I've never, ever thought that. I don't know, but I can't remember the exact details of everything I said in the video. I think where we disagree is probably, I'll be very quick. Last year, obviously, Labour was saying we should give more money to the police. And I said, well, you know, if you think that there should be, you know, people should have a lower working week, you know, better pensions, then I can see the argument, and outsourcing. That's a very weak argument ultimately. But so I thought people were a bit hard and fast about it. But generally, we need fewer police, fewer courts, fewer prisons.
Yeah. Do you want to go into that, or should we move on to some nice? Michael's like, I'm outnumbered here.
Congrats on the 100k, folks. Can Ash talk about the I'm literally a communist days? How did all that go down? How did things change for Novara before and after? And then, this is still the same super chat. So that was from John Heimlich. So tell us about I'm literally a communist.
So that was, I'd been on Good Morning Britain once before, and it was about the national anthem with Andrew Rossendale, who is an MP for Romford. And I just remember thinking that the whole discussion was silly because they were trying to drag me into this, like, do you hate the national anthem? And I was just like, this is fucking dumb. So that time I remember being like, it doesn't even bang like that. Replace it with wearing my Rolex, whatever. Because that was my way of saying, I think this discussion is stupid. And then they got me back because they'd obviously loved that I'd managed to like get in a one-on-one with Piers Morgan, because that's what they love for the debates. That's what the producers are looking for. And this was when Donald Trump was coming to the UK. And so I went to go talk about it, and he kept putting this question to me about how many people did Obama deport. And I thought, it's 2 million, but that's got to be too much. I can't be right about that number. So I didn't want to say a wrong number. So I was like, look, I don't know. You keep asking me this question, I can't answer it. And then he was like, well, you're hero Obama and you don't know the facts. And then I got pissed off and I was like, I'm literally a communist. Like you haven't done your research. And I thought I did really badly. And I remember talking to my partner, and I remember ringing up Owen at like 7 a.m, whatever it was, being like, I really fucked up. I'm so sorry. This was the worst thing ever. And I then like hid my phone and crawled into bed because I was literally like, I've just done the worst interview ever. This is discredited the movement that I'm a part of. It's discredited the left. This is just embarrassing. What I've done is fundamentally embarrassing. Crawled into bed, emerged 2 hours later and like seen what had happened, and like Aaron's texting me and like you guys are like messaging me being like, oh my god, like what the fuck. That's, you know, it created this moment which I didn't expect. And what changed, I think, for Novara is that the minute you bring in traffic, and this is what I think makes us different, and I think, Michael, you'd said this a week ago, which is you've got individual left-wing thinkers and commentators who, no shade to them, because I think what they do is really, really important. They take up a role of like a thinkfluencer, and it's very much them on their own, and they start the Patreon or the Substack, and it goes towards supporting their work and a few people that support their work. For instance, a producer here, a videographer there, or whatever. But it's essentially not about creating an institution. Whereas because that moment happened, and then just suddenly there was like loads of followers coming in, there was loads of traffic for Novara because we clipped it and put it out, we had an organization which was ready to step in and absorb it. So what I think has always been really powerful about what we do is that we've got a front of house team of Dalia, Aaron, Michael, James as well, who go out and make these interventions, but it's not about us soaking it up and keeping it here. You've got an articles team who are out there trying to grow investigative capacity and reporting capacity. You've got incredible producers who've got vision for the organization. I mean, like Gary, oh my God, like if he got hit by a bus tomorrow, we'd be fucked. But there's also Fox, who I think has really refined what Tysky Sour is and where he wants to go with it. And in terms of thinking about the space that LBC occupies and how could we mimic and subvert that. And it's because I think we've got this very symbiotic relationship between the stuff that we do as individuals and the structure of the organization as a whole. And I think that that's what makes us different from other left-wing thinkers, writers, commentators, pundits, who, if they have been excluded, as most of us are, from having a stable job and an income from a legacy media outlet, that's the only way that they can do it. But I think it's because, you guys had that vision from the start of it was never just about you and James. And pretty early on, you recognized that you wanted to grow it. Sorry, that's a really long way to answer the question, but it's because I find left bureaucracy really interesting. Like, so yeah.
No, I think that's super important. It's also worth noting that I'm literally a communist video has it had 1 million views over the last 28 days. So it was on 2 million for a while, and then it went big, I think, on Reddit. And now it's had 1 million views in the last 28 days. So you've gone viral somewhere on the dark web, Ash. Sorry, but it's
Michael, still a communist.
It's good for
still
our channel.
Communist, man. I'm done for shilling for a crumb of social democracy, man. Like no more marginal constituencies in the rain. I even was like, hey, you know what? I'll be less of an abolitionist for you guys. Whatever you want, Milton Keynes. Didn't fucking work. Back to plan A.
We've got a new question. I just need to wait for it to start at the beginning. Super chat from Oliver Kant. Thank you very much, Oliver. Could you describe your personal political awakenings and journeys up to now? Mine was a mix of trying to understand the 2008 crash when it happened, finding out about the Allende coup, and Bill Hicks. So the Allende coup is in the 1970s when the socialist president of Chile was overthrown by a CIA-backed coup. Bill Hicks is a great left-wing comedian in the United States. Who wants to go first? What was your political awakening? Go on, Aaron.
I think Dalia should go first.
Yeah, go on, Dalia.
God, I don't know. That requires me to think of a cohesive narrative of my politics, which I avoid on a daily basis trying to do that. So I feel like for me, like a lot of Middle Eastern households, growing up in sort of the 2000s, the Iraq War was just such a key politicizing moment for me. It was, every dinner table, every kind of, and also just how, so I think, the facts of the Iraq War itself and how kind of understanding kind of the connection between politics and violence and oil and, the resources economy and things like that, kind of in wanting to figure out why there was this thing that my parents were so scared about and what was happening and how that was against what was happening in the media at the time, and how that was kind of all unfolding was really a massive entry for me and really helped me to kind of understand a lot of things about sort of how not just the facts of the Iraq War as in the fact that it was an oil war and it was, using this very this fabricated idea of democracy and stuff, but also looking at how kind of the stories that are told about, the global South, the stories that are told about the role of Britain and America and Europe historically, and how those are told in the media and how those are experienced. A lot of my mum's relationships with people at work and friends of hers, really broke down over that time, because there was this sense of her being this is a terrible idea, and her, friends that people she'd been friends with for 15 years being oh, but you just don't understand and value democracy, and seeing those kind of things happening it both like crystallized a lot of things, or like got me really interested in understanding things in like a kind of macro sense of like why the war happened and like how this has like historical roots and how this like keeps happening and how it will keep happening, but also the kind of like, I guess, like how that kind of macro stuff gets translated into a culture war on the interpersonal kind of like ground level, and how that kind of like plays out together was for me, I think, really like when I started. So I really came in through being very interested in like international policy and stuff like that. And then that just, you just start the ball rolling, and then it just kind of like escalated. And now I'm jobless. Now I'm jobless and ranting it on YouTube like every Friday.
That's the job.
So yeah, well, I guess. My mum doesn't see it that way.
Ash, do you want to give us yours?
Yeah, I mean, my mum, like probably the single biggest political influence. I think most of you have met her. Michael, maybe you haven't.
I don't think I have. I'm upset.
Wonderful woman.
So handsome. She's like your one woman thirst squad. I mean, it's actually
we need to meet.
kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, no.
This is the affirmation I need.
She's a hoot after a bottle of wine, let me tell you. But the single biggest political influence, because she very firmly believed that if you didn't have a very strong political analysis as a woman of color, that psychologically you couldn't survive, and you would be so damaged by what it's like to navigate a world and a society which is dehumanizing you at every turn. And for her, because she's got this really phenomenal emotional intelligence, like she's got this incredible quality of being able to see things from the inside view, and that's how she gets to a systemic analysis. And I've always found that really interesting about her. For her, it's been about, you know, when you're that child and you are Asian or you are Black and you cannot see a single beautiful image of yourself anywhere, what does that do to you psychologically? And then you take onto that how you're being treated by teachers. You add on to that how you're being treated by police. You add on to that how you're, you know, your experiences of perhaps social services. And for her, she understands that as a kind of very emotional psychological violence. So she insisted that we have the tools to understand the world around us. And when we were little, that was the children's books that used to get sold at like the Walter Rodney bookshop and through Bogle Overture of, you know, the Anansi stories and stuff like that. So the only ones we could see any kids with dark skin. Then we got a bit older and it was Naomi Campbell was, because there weren't South Asian models. So Naomi Campbell was like the institution in the house. And when Naomi Campbell did Playboy when I was 7, my mom got the edition of Playboy, and I'll never forget, it was Naomi Campbell in the white latex with the white phone. And my mum got this issue of Playboy and covered up all the boobs with smiley face stickers to like be like, and this is what a powerful, beautiful woman with dark skin looks like. And then I got a bit older and she gave me Frantz Fanon, Black Skins, White Masks. So that was this huge formative moment, because I arrived at Marx through Fanon rather than the other way around. And so that was just so formative for my worldview, my analysis, where I think about, where I start my analysis. Because I think that one of the things that marks us as different is that Aaron and James and Michael have got really good systemic analyses, which sometimes I struggle to get to, and I've got to start from the person and the subjectivity. And that's entirely from my mum, and that's entirely from Fanon as well. It's just about how you get there.
You're gone. Do you want another question, or Aaron? Do you want to give us yours? I think Aaron, give us yours, and then we'll get in.
I'll be quick. Yeah, I think you know, obviously we're all people who've studied and been in, you know, higher education, but I also think the older I get, the more I realise the apple doesn't fall that far from the tree. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be just like your parents. You know, in many ways, I'm completely different to my parents. Neither of them enjoy reading. You know, they weren't bookish people. They didn't study particularly. But my mum was quite religious. She's a Roman Catholic, and she had a very definitive sense of right and wrong. Often she was quite self-righteous in a bad way. But I feel like sometimes I can see some of that with her. And then with my dad, like Dalia said, same with Ash, I'm sure, but with Middle Eastern families, I was growing up, and before 2000, everybody believed everything the television said. The BBC doesn't lie. The newspapers don't lie. I mean, obviously the Sun newspaper or whatever, but generally speaking, there was high confidence in the media. And there was this like crazed Iranian who'd be saying, it's all fucking bullshit. They're all lying. Don't believe them. And my mum was like, he's just crazy. Just ignore your dad. He's just being himself. He's just ranting again. But then when like the Iraq war happened and Afghanistan, he was like, they're all lying. And I said, well, maybe they believe what they're doing. When did I say it? He was coming into the lounge like a pot of rice and chicken. I said, maybe they believe it. And he'd been cooking this for like 2 hours, throws it on the floor. He said, how fucking dare you? Of course they don't believe it. He was right. He was entirely right. This man went to university briefly. He was doing engineering before the Iranian Revolution. And he's never read a book on politics, but he lived through the Iranian Revolution. He saw the complete misrepresentation of his people in the media. He doesn't need a PhD in media studies to know these people lie and how the media is effectively a representation of material, economic, and ultimately ethno-nationalist interests in many incidents, right? And so, the representations he saw of Iranians across the 1980s, how that changed after the revolution, he sort of gave me that. I went on the Iraq War demo when I was 18, 19, and this is before social media. I got a train up there with my mate by myself. I mean, there was an impulse there. But I think that then combines later on, as the Super Chat said, with 2008 and the crisis. Because obviously this whole thing's about to collapse, and I'm thinking, great, this is brilliant when Lehman collapsed. And my friends were going, oh, this is terrible news. I'm going, why is it terrible news? It's really good. These people have had this coming for a very long time. And it was then when I realized, we're not on the same side, And I was like, I need to find people on my side who agree with me. So it was staggered. Iraq and Lehman, I think, like the same with many people.
What about you, Michael? Come on.
Go on. Yeah, I'll go quickly because I want to get through these questions. But I suppose I agree with the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. As again, obviously it's not destiny. But for me, lots of my politics comes from my parents who are very traditional social democratic parent. That's what I was describing. My family, a very traditional social democratic family. Both of them work for the council. My mum benefits advice. So they're both retired now, but she gave advice to people on what benefits they could claim. And her experience of Tory austerity was just being so furious that basically people whose lives are already difficult were just being made so much more difficult in such an unnecessary way. And then from my dad, who is also he works for the council, like computer programming. And he was someone who, I kind of consider him as one of the lucky people in a way, in that he got a nice stable job in the early 80s and kept doing it for 30 years, and that just gave him the ability to raise a family. And I mean that was relevant to me in a way because I used to be kind of like an anarchist, break everything, smash everything, we need absolutely, and I was like, to be honest, actually sort of like a strong social democracy can do quite a lot. A strong social democracy can give you quite a lot of freedom. And I think sort of my mum sort of taught me how sort of like government action can just so cruelly take that away. And then from my dad, I kind of feel like, social democracy can do a lot. I mean, then also from more recently, it's sort of feeling like, yeah, that's the case in a Western country. Obviously, that's not the case in terms of global politics, which is why for me, really, the most important thing when you're sort of talking about what left-wing party is going to come into power is what their foreign policy is. So, if Keir Starmer nationalizes the water or not, I don't give that much of a shit. I mean, obviously, I prefer him to do it. But what I think is most significant and what will have the most impact on sort of like life or death situations with people's lives is, are they going to invade another country? Are they going to have a fair trade policy, et cetera, et cetera? So I think it's that sort of understanding of what's wrong and what's right in a social democratic Western democracy, and then also having some perspective that what really matters is what's going on in the global south. I was slightly incoherent, but let's go to our next question.
I don't think so. I also think that's where me and Michael piss off the anarchos all the time, is because we're actually team family values.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's mostly conservative.
Your most problematic view, Ash, is that you quite like the nuclear family.
No. It doesn't have to be a nuclear family.
Doesn't have to be nuclear.
Proud child of a single parent family. I actually think that the best thing a woman can do is divorce a man, and everyone should do it at least once. No. But I think that sorry, little tangent. But I believe strongly that children need to know who their primary attachment is. And that's why I do not go in for this whole communal way of rearing children and people come in and out. No. I don't believe in any of that shit. Children need a primary attachment. They need to know where to go. There needs to be accountability, responsibility, and obligation. Doesn't have to be nuclear. It can be single parent, could be two parent, could be extended family, could be, queer parents, any of that kind of thing. But primary attachment and consistency. That's why.
Ash doing like a parenting like show would be amazing, actually.
Yeah, so I don't have fucking kids because I can't afford them.
No, but like once you have a kid, it'd be sick. Just like Instagram live everything. Like, oh god, I was completely wrong. I want to post now. No,
I actually want to call you. Can someone else do this for me?
Yeah, go on. I think we could have delved into a real family discussion there, but no. Give us the next question. No, give us the next question, Gaza.
Oh, the audience can't hear Gary.
The audience can't hear Gary. So I'm not going crazy. There is another voice that is speaking to me. Right, super chat. Swapline Bling. What are the prospects for Novara having correspondence or even a second studio in the north or in Wales? Ooh. I think we'd really like that. I think this goes back actually to what Ash was saying, which is what's really exciting about being part of Novara Media and having you as our audience and our supporters is that we hope we can build something which rivals The Guardian, which rivals sort of mainstream TV stations, and so we can have correspondence around the country, studios around the country, and especially investigative reporters around the country. Obviously, all these things are the really pricey things, right? So in terms of having two studios, obviously that's a massive cost. So what we've done at Novara is a kind of slow and steady building out from what works. So we have these fairly lightweight products, things like Tysky Sour, where there's two of us speaking 2 nights a week, talking about the big stories of the day, giving our opinions. But we want to be making, original news, and we want to be representing every part of the country, which at the moment, I don't think we'd claim we do that, but that absolutely is one of our aims. And actually, this is a good time to shout out that our articles team have really, really been upping their game of late. So there's lots of original reporting, original investigations, and that's really where you're going to start to see, well, every part of Novara is going to massively grow next year. But you'll really notice if you check out our articles game, that the progress being made is super, really, really impressive. And I think that's, you're going to see that from all different parts of Novara, that we are going to, be a proper media organization that can tick all of the boxes, that can do all of these things. I don't know, does anyone else have comments on that particular question?
I will, but I'll wait. Oh yeah, Northern Office. Go on, Mike. What were you going to say?
Yeah.
I mean, my take on it is that I think that what we have to do is essentially mirror our costs once, right? So you grow in London to the extent that you want to, and then you've got to double it again so you can have the same labor costs outside of London. Because while commercial property and whatever and having a studio would be much cheaper, labor wouldn't. And what you would want is to have a front, because we do already have Novara staffers who don't live in London, except no one knows it because they're not front of house, but they're still hugely influential on our political direction, on our general sensibility, on how we're run. And what we would want is see that reflected in a front of house team backed up by the same infrastructure of producers, videographers, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is that if you give enough money, you will hear some regional accents on here which aren't just Tottenham.
Yeah, like this stuff, it costs money and it needs to be resourced. Yeah, because it's like, and that's the difference. No, well, is that's the difference, I guess, between like tokenism and just kind of like responsive sort of like, tokenizing, like quick, we need to like save face, and actually being like, okay, well, this project kind of started out of, like an occupation in London. So it kind of has that sort of where it's was generated. And so it will engender particular kind of like geographical, like, grounding, but like the way that you go to genuine like representation and like meaningful representation is by doing it when you have the resources and backing up with infrastructure. And so that's why that's why it's like so, and I talk about like the pre-2015 wasteland, and it's like, it was because there was like this period during like, you know, in the UK kind of like left, where it was like being organized or being like building sustainable infrastructures that could be scaled up was like seen as like neoliberal and bad. And it's like, no, like actually it's really important to do that. And like, we don't have enough people who like take an interest in how, and that's what Craig is really good at doing, it like taking an interest in like how you actually run a thing that can be like scaled and like resourced, and having that strategy. And it's like, that's what I think is so impressive about how, you know, Novara's weathered a lot of storms, and that's taken that kind of like ability to think of how we can be resilient. And that's like, it's kind of like, it's boring, it's not glamorous, but it's really, really fucking important.
I do think there is actually a political challenge, though. And I think this is something which I'd like to hear you guys answer. And I don't have to answer it because I'm the one who came up with the question. But if you were to have a Northern office with the same amount of, you know, Labour power and resources as the London one, it would also challenge, I mean, Aaron, you obviously don't live in London, but consider you part of the metropolitan bougie London left. It would also challenge our politics in a real way, you know. So the BBC obviously have got a huge base in Salford that hasn't made an impact on the London centricity of its politics. There's a very clear delineation of where power lies. So should we actually do this and do it well and do it meaningfully, there would be a challenge to our worldviews. And what I'm just saying is, being honest, how would you react to that?
Can I respond
to
this?
No one wants to answer that. Yeah.
No, because I think a lot of this came to me with the Brexit vote in 2016. You know, a week before the referendum, we did a video, and I went to Bournemouth, and we were doing Vox Pops, and it became very clear that about 80% of people we were asking, and it was the middle of the day, so it's going to be older people and so on, were very keen. Not just, oh yeah, I think I'll vote Brexit. They were looking forward to voting to leave the European Union. And it was just so at odds with the experience in London. I think obviously we all had that realization, but I think what you guys have just said about, do you want to do it properly or not, it's hugely important. Yes, we could ventriloquize people in the north. Yes, we could say, we want a tiny version of our London office in a sort of a pseudo-London, aka Manchester, right? You could do that. I'll give you an example here, you know, Pod Save America. It's 3 white guys who do the podcast. All the back office, the merch, the producers are like women of color and so on. And they go, we're very progressive. We have women of color. Yeah, they're doing all the sort of back office production work. We want to do that properly, right? We want to elevate voices who don't look and sound and think like us, but have a certain perspective on how to change society. And as you guys have said, that's going to take a while. I think the question of a Northern office and a Welsh or Scottish office is very different, though, because the thing there is these are distinct nations. And have we covered them as well as we could do? No, because ultimately they do have, you know, the North is ultimately part of the same, I think, actually, very similar political culture, but also just English culture is quite an identifiable thing. Scotland's political culture is a different political culture. There is literally the Scottish Parliament where they make decisions. They're their own politicians, often much more effective and professional than the ones in Westminster, by the way. And yeah, we don't really have a footing there because, as you guys have said, it's about resources. Do we want to do that? Absolutely. I remember 5 years ago, me slagging off The Guardian, and a very reputable journalist, friend of the organisation, said, "What are you doing? Why are you alienating all these people?" He said, "What do you want to do? Replace them?" And I said, "Well, I mean, that would be great. I would like us to make them shift a certain way, and yes, take a decent chunk of their audience. If we have 5% of the Guardian's audience, great. But you know, we are going to have to do it, and it's going to take a while." And the thing that Dalia said makes me laugh. It's so true. You know, people can get down on Corbynism, and they can say the last, you know, sort of 5 years, you know, what a waste and so on. It's absolutely true. 5 years ago, the left in this country was so unserious. There was a debate about whether you should be organised or not. You know, should people tell other people what to do? Maybe that's right wing. You know, maybe it's right wing that you have collective action and forms of solidarity, or just a formal organisation, which is ridiculous. And going back to the things that we were saying earlier on about individuals and so on, and Novara, us all finding Novara a far more accommodating place, both politically and professionally, because it's an organisation. I think that's really, really, really important. I don't think any of us will be here without the organisation to fall back on in a number of ways. I think, if you're just by yourself, you will get gobbled up. And I think the strength of Novara, and why I think we will ultimately cover the North, Wales, Scotland very well and authentically, is because we're all very cooperative people. We all understand our limits. We bring other people in. We want to build a really effective media organisation that tells the most important stories of this century, And we know that to do that, we'll have to have people who aren't exactly like us, And I think a lot of media organisations don't think like that, especially the big ones, especially the legacy ones. We recognise it as a limit. But as Michael, Ash, and Dalia said, novaramedia.com/support. I think the Welsh question is a bit different to the North. I would love to see bureaus. I'd love to see international bureaus and national bureaus in this country as well, this nation state, before anybody jumps on me.
Yeah, let's get some more questions in. Sparky Taggart, congratulations on 100k. Thank you very much. Here's a bonus. Thank you very much. What's the worst time you've lost an argument on TV, in a debate, or on the doorstep? That is a very interesting question. Does anyone have one that jumps out?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm staying quiet.
I think maybe mine was doing Andrew Marr paper review, and I said that the idea that the left had lionized Venezuela was something of a myth. And what I was trying to say was that the new influx of membership for Momentum and the Labour Party, while they had, what I had in my head was like, actually, they're not that hung up on Maduro or whatever and have strong opinions. You've got a smaller core of an anti-imperialist left, which is deeply invested, but garbled it, put it out there, and then just got, and rightly so, jumped on, piled on about it because it was inaccurate when you think about the kind of support there had been, in the face of, sanctions, delegitimization, attempted coups, that was probably the one where I felt the most like I got that wrong. And then I lost plenty of arguments on the doorstep because fundamentally I was coming from a value system so shaped by the place that I lived. And I stand by it. I really do stand by it. I do think that the diversity of London is something which should be replicated everywhere. I think that's sick. But because I didn't have an idea of what it meant to live without it, and I had people on the doorstep telling me, like, I'm not voting for Jeremy Corbyn. Literally, it was said to me in a 98% white constituency. I don't want Jeremy Corbyn in power because he's going to let all the Muslims take over. And I was like, well, I'm the wrong message carrier for this. I was just like, it's not that like, oh, I lost it because we had a battle of the wits and I came off worse. It was just that we had two value systems which had no place of overlap that I could find. And it was my failure. It was my failure in terms of not being able to articulate a point of crossover. Because if I can't do that in a place which was like so economically dispossessed, I don't have a business in advocating for the universality of my politics if I can't acknowledge the limitations of it. Does that make sense?
Anyone
Dalia?
else?
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of has put us in all of a kind of, because I think with the kind of like movements over the past, these sort of electoral movements in the US and the UK over the past like few years have kind of had this idea that, just focus on the economics and like acting like the economics is separate from what is designated as culture, what is designated as the social. And, thinking that, which is not a position I hold, but thinking, that in terms of like politically focusing on a kind of a particular economic message will be enough to neutralize the kind of culture wars that are very much set up by people who win on that terrain of, designating like some things as British and some things as anti-British, and making so many people feel that what is designated as anti-British is like a personal, like, endangering threat. And I think that like one thing that I underestimated was actually just like how kind of like effective and affective that connection and that kind of like that relationship was. And I think I don't know if this is like kind of similarly to what Ash feels, but it's like I felt like I don't need to make that argument because it's insulting to me to even have to make that argument, that like, and that it's not something that I have to kind of like not understand, but like it's not something that I should have to like defend, and realizing that, and I think that having the dust settle, and especially like looking historically at movements, it's like that's kind of the dirty work of struggle. And I think that I kind of like really underestimated that, and really underestimated the importance of not just creating stories that can counter that, but actually creating like the infrastructures and movements and ways of attaching to the projects that we have that confront and deal and with some kind of belief that people can move through that as an underlying principle, that trying to appeal to a kind of economic universalism, which is something I never believed would work, but I think I kind of thought that lots of really smart people who know a lot better than me were saying that would work. So I was like, okay then. And it's like, no, we need to like regroup and realize like the fucking terrain that this is being fought on, and it's not a choice actually to disinvest from it. So that's what I've been thinking of, is like, how do we fight that? How do we work in that space? And yeah, it's hard, but this is hard. And like, when you look historically, people have had to deal with much more like contested, difficult terrains than, fucking Ben Bradley. He's a really useful enemy, actually. Like a really useful person to go against, because you feel really fucking smart and savvy once you've dealt with him.
I think I've got one which is not necessarily me. I mean, I'm sure I've lost fucking loads of arguments on television, but that's kind of for the audience to make up. But the one where I'm sort of like, oh, I'm kind of sad I said that on national television, was actually in the Reefgate controversy. So, I mean, you'll probably all remember the Reefgate controversy. This was Jeremy Corbyn had gone to a memorial service for people who'd been killed by the Israeli government, essentially, when they bombed illegally, against international law, the headquarters of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in Tunisia. And the controversy was that Corbyn had laid a wreath next to two people who the entire mainstream media were calling terrorists. They were saying, these are just terrorists. This is just Jeremy Corbyn supporting terrorism. And, I got invited on by Sky. I was like, to be honest, I don't really want to go on for this, but no one's putting forward the argument that actually it was really cool that he was at this PLO memorial, Palestinian Liberation Organization memorial, when he was a backbench MP, because no one else is bothering to do this shit. So I was like, I'll go on and say that. But one of the things I said was, look, it's great he was there. If he laid a wreath at these terrorists' grave, yeah, sure, that was a mistake, but whatever. But sort of researching it afterwards, yeah, the people who's, the controversial characters was Salah Khalaf and Atef Beseso. And to be honest, they are genuinely controversial. And they were involved in what we would call terrorist actions. But they were also, and one of them was the head of the intelligence service of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. One of them was the deputy head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization intelligence service. So to say, yeah, what they did was in some cases controversial, and you might condemn it. You might think it was terrible, some of the actions that were taken. And you're absolutely well within your right to. I think probably I do as well. But to just dismiss them as terrorists when Tony Blair is able to stand up at the funeral of Ariel Sharon, someone who is been held responsible for actual massacres by the Israeli government, by his own, by institutions in his own country. I think there is actually a lot of racism involved in sort of saying these people who are high up in the PLO were terrorists, and these people who were high up in the Israeli government were politicians who had to make difficult decisions. And so even though, I mean, obviously the main thing that people saw when I went on Sky and said that was he's a terrorist sympathizer and he likes the Palestinians and hates the Israelis. Sort of like when I came off, I was sort of like, maybe I shouldn't just have dismissed them as terrorists who Corbyn's shouldn't have laid their Reef at their thing. And this is not to say I agree with, they were involved, I think, in Black September, who did undertake, terrorist actions. But at the same time, they were involved in a very violent conflict. And I don't think just saying these are terrorists does justice to the two sides in that debate. And I think calling them terrorists and calling the other side in that conflict, which is Israeli politicians, just politicians who it's completely reasonable to give a eulogy, calling them giants of the Middle East, which is what Tony Blair did with Ariel Sharon, is completely, imbued with racism. So I wasn't particularly proud that sort of like in a flippant comment, I'd sort of taken part in that.
I've got a question for you guys off the back of that, and it's a version of a question which I saw in the sheet that we have of all the crowdsourced ones. Someone asked, are we just kidding ourselves if we think that armed struggle isn't the only route to social change? And I think I think that question itself might be slightly something of a dead end, because I think we've all got an agreement that armed struggle isn't the only route. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've not been out training with like an AK-47 recently. But maybe dealing with the question of political violence and radical violence. How do you deal with the moral bog of dealing with questions of political violence? Aaron?
Is it really possible to create a better, fairer society without some form of armed struggle? Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think ultimately political change, inevitably political change comes about through violence. Inevitably. So either there is some form of an uprising or a civil war or a revolution, or people are martyred in the name of those things, right? So we can talk about, for instance, the Black Civil Rights Movement and the Freedom Rides and Martin Luther King. And so violence was inflicted upon these people. So yeah, you get the Black Civil Rights kind of movement leading to the 1964 Civil Rights Act and so on. But the idea was a non-violent struggle. It was a very violent struggle, but the violence was being inflicted upon them. Or if you look at, the struggle for Indian independence from the 1920s onwards, it was a non-violent, the mainstream elements of it through the Congress Party and so on. It was a non-violent struggle, but there was a great deal of violence being inflicted on the people that were leading it. Mahatma Gandhi's wife, nobody talks about this. The entire Congress Party leadership was incarcerated during the Second World War. The Indian Army was the largest ever volunteer army in the history of humanity. Britain loses, the Allies have no chance in Asia without this particular army. The political representatives of that country, the ones who had any kind of democratic mandate whatsoever from India, obviously not including Pakistan, the Congress Party, were incarcerated. Mahatma Gandhi's wife died in prison, right? Who talks about that in this country? I think in 1945 she died, right? And we say, oh, well, India, there was a non-violent thing, and so they managed to get their independence. Yeah, these people suffered a great deal. So I think violence is kind of inherent in any political shift. The question is the allocation of it. Suffragism, any movement, Chartisms, you could look at the Great Reform Act. You can look at the rise of the trade unions and the labour movement in this country. All of it's done on the back of a great deal of suffering. The question is who's doing the suffering, and I don't think, for instance, there's any great moral worth in the fact that tens of thousands of people died, for the factory acts to happen before people said, oh, this is kind of terrible. I don't think that's any more morally praiseworthy than another country where maybe there was a revolution uprising against the ruling class. I think they're effectively the same thing. In this country, fortunately, we live in a liberal democracy. It's not perfect because of people making those very sacrifices. In a country which wasn't, of course, you can see there could be speculative, legitimating arguments for political violence. Of course, it could be. If it's an occupied country, if it's a country which is subject to something like, for instance, apartheid South Africa, you can see why armed struggle will be acceptable in apartheid South Africa. But the idea that it's necessary to any political improvements ever, I think that's empirically wrong. I think ultimately, ideas and values are what drive collective action, generally speaking. I think without those, you get nowhere.
I mean, I think that one of the problems with this is that, what is considered political violence is presented as this kind of like exceptional thing that happens in discrete moments, whereas like political violence, like slow violence done in order to sustain particular political systems, is an ongoing fact of the way that our world is organized. You know, the displacement of people from their homes, whether it's, you know, in the context of, you know, refugee rights, or it's in the context of people being gentrified out of the places where they've, you know, got their roots and got their community. Austerity is a form of political violence. The consequences of that are so violent. But I think that, like, for me, I'm increasingly realizing that, you know, we need to focus, like, not to be like, we need to do this or whatever, but like the politics of like care and belonging and living beyond survival and sustenance, and, you know, what Thatcherism did in kind of like breaking the idea that you can rely on your community to care for you, that so much, especially in Britain, and I think I learned this very much in the 2019 election, is that like that was ideologically so successful, and that, you know, this idea of like, I am willing to block my own class interests in order to make sure that someone else doesn't get a bigger piece of the pie than I think that they should get. And this idea that it's stupid or pathetic or weak to fight for someone that you don't know or you don't connect with, or that you don't, you know, feel belonging with for whatever reason, that has been so effective. And I think that the power can really come in creating infrastructures of care and infrastructures of, you know, especially as people, as, you know, the dominating, whereas, you know, over the 20th century, the dominating logic of capital was so involved in kind of like recruiting everyone into this like increasingly massive industrial working class and whatever. Now it's a logic of expulsion. It's a logic of people being expelled from the means of survival. And the politics of care and the politics of community and the politics of you are the victim of constant everyday political violence, and we are building a movement that will be able to protect you and engage you and empower you in that context, is the route to power. Because, you know, and I think that it feels like a really sexy thing to kind of like, that doesn't feel like an exciting thing to do, but to me it's kind of the only route to power in this context. And I think the 2019 election, you know, and going, you know, because like going and just seeing kind of like the severe isolation that has been engendered in this country is like honestly the biggest obstacle to us rewiring the economy for the many. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
Yeah, let's get in another question. Or Ash, you gagging for that one?
Nah.
Let's get in another one. Right. Shed, where are you hiding James Butler nowadays? That's a very easy question with a very easy answer, which is that his Novara FM is back bigger and better than before. Really, we've got a new audio producer, and James Butler's Novara FM is going really from strength to strength. So it's out every Friday on our Novara Media podcast channel. You have to check it out because James Butler is very much still, you know, front and center in Novara Media, but he is primarily in the audio section. So go check out Novara FM. The last few shows have been fantastic.
We have some jokes
Fairly
questions,
factual
Gaza.
one, wasn't it? Yeah, give us some jokes ones. I think while we're getting those ridiculous ones, I think on the violence question, because it is super interesting, I'm on the strategic question. I tend towards, I feel like the strategy of non-violence in countries like the UK and the USA, countries who aren't at risk of coups from outside and also are liberal democracies where, you know, public opinion matters. I think the strength of non-violence very, very important. But what I would recommend you listen to is Aaron Bastani's conversation with Vincent Bevins from earlier this year, where they talk about how the limits of non-violence in global South countries, where you had fantastic, really inspiring, non-violent, basically reformist movements, social democratic movements in global south countries of Indonesia or Chile, who were committed to non-violence and who were, attempting to build just a better, not necessarily even a revolutionary society, just a decent social democracy that we take for granted here, and were violently overthrown by the military and by CIA-backed coups. So when I see on Twitter sort of liberals saying like, oh, Cuba, these Stalinists, why couldn't they just do democracy? Then I kind of say, well, look at Indonesia, look at Chile. They tried to do democracy and they were overthrown by violent coups. So that's why I'm not particularly quick to judge, movements which are insurrectionary in global south countries where they're at risk of an American coup. Here we're not really at risk of it, which is why I tend towards saying, non-violent strategies are probably going to be more effective.
Can I come
question
very, very quickly, because I've just thought of a reply. I'm with you on the question of strategic non-violence in this country generally, but I also think that there are times where, and I was thinking a lot about the 2011 riots, which when we talk about the history of Corbynism, no one ever includes. People talk about the student movement, people talk about the mobilizations of the TUC in 2011, and no one really talks about what happened in August after Mark Duggan was killed. And where you draw the line of what you call violence, if you include destruction of property alongside, actual harm, physical harm being done to human beings, I think people have different lines on that, but it certainly wasn't a case of, as a strategy, adopting one approach or another. It was something which had been decades in the making, of the complete abandonment of certain communities, the political abandonment of those communities as well, and then expecting that there wouldn't be some kind of rupture because of it. And I think that the experience of those riots has played a part in the articulation of a kind of collective selfhood for people of color in this country. The eye that is cast upon deaths in police custody, the sense of, well, that kind of break can, is one death away, I think has always remained there. And I think has also achieved a kind of clarity of political purpose for people of color in this country after the anti-racism movement was so fragmented through the 90s. I think was really disempowered through also being incorporated into the institutions of the establishment. So I think that when we talk about this question of strategic nonviolence, one of the things that we do have to have in the back of our mind are those urban uprisings which have absolutely nothing to do with the collective organization of the left whatsoever. And that doesn't mean you jump on it and you go, well, here's the narrative that can make it all seem like it's part of a plan. No, you just have to factor it in. The second thing that I want to say is that I was actually having this debate with my partner a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about, if you lived in the United States, or if we lived in the United States, would you want to have a gun? Like, would you want to have a gun? He was like, well, not being funny, but like, they make racists differently there. I don't want some like pickup truck blazoned in the Confederate flag coming around, like trying to kill you. I would want a gun in the house. And for me, this was an ethical question. It wasn't just a political question as we've been addressing it. It was an ethical question of, would you want a gun in the house? And I was like, no, absolutely. I think the fuck not. I would never want a gun in the house. Statistically, you are so much more likely to use it against a member of your own household. No, absolutely not. So I think there are ethical questions that sometimes we dodge by appealing to history about the sanctity of a human life, even versus your own, even in a situation of self-defense or continuous violence, harassment, stochastic terrorism, whatever. And I do think that as leftists, we have to address that ethical question of, would you ever have the means of killing someone in your house? It's, it's the sole purpose of a gun is to hurt another person. It's not like a knife. You can't prepare or joint a chicken with a gun. It's got no other purpose. So I do think that there are ethical questions. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyway, we're not going to move to the States, so it's never going to come up.
As the next question comes up, I've remembered the other reason why I don't drink beers on shows, which is that you need to pee halfway through. So I'm going to tap out for just like 2 minutes.
Okay,
Someone else
so
Who
he
reads
stays
stays
out the
out.
latest? Go on, you read it. I'll read Ash. Who stays out the latest on a Novara night out?
Oh, I'm the first in bed. Like, I am the biggest grandma. The whole lockdown thing, it's like, I like the fact that I can be in my bed at 10 p.m. every night and no one's peer pressuring me. So I'm definitely not. I have no stamina.
Ash, who do you think? I know who I think. Who do you think?
James Butler, without a doubt.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's an animal.
Like, I swear I've like encountered at
His
James
organs are
the
made of
afters,
Teflon.
after the afters, and he's still awake, and I'm like, what the hell, bro? Like, I've had some reckless ones, but James Butler is something else. Like 2 days later, he's speaking Latin. You know, it's
I've gone like on a 2-day bender with James, and I'm like, wow, I feel destroyed. And then James is still fine. You know, he's like going on another day or two. I'm like, James. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. James, the only person that is a patch on James Butler is James Meadway.
really.
James Meadway will just sort of drink for 24 hours. And go, right, okay, that's it. Right, I'll see you in about 2 hours. I'm doing X, Y, Z. You know, I'm going to the gym in 2 hours. And you've been drinking for 24 hours, James. Anyway.
I can't do
James
that.
Butler.
I can't do that. I get the beer fear. Do you guys get beer fear?
Oh,
What's that?
I mean, I'm in fear at all times anyway. But like, I like as I've gotten older, like the hangovers, like the hanging, like the anxiety that I get when I'm hungover is like, I just feel like I'm in a vortex of just like panic. Like I cannot handle my liquor anymore. I say as I'm like making my way through tumbler of rum, but yeah, like I am just like not. I'm the biggest lightweight ever. I'm like, there's 5 foot of me, and it shows when I drink.
I was gonna tell, like, because obviously with lockdown and stuff, like I've not been going out. I've not even gone to like any of the illegal raves because I was scared of getting caught. That was my reason for not doing it. I was like, if I get caught, it would be the dumbest like controversy ever. You just can't do it. But oh god, should I even tell the story? Yes, I should tell the story. Okay, I will tell the story. So I am very, very much in favor of the full legalization of drugs. And there's no secret. And I've also made no secret of the fact that I think lots of young people take recreational substances, as have I in the past in countries where it may or may not be illegal. I'm not admitting to any crimes. What I will say is that I did do some hallucinogenics over the summer for the first time in years, right? Years. And I thought, and what I was worried about is that through the process of having been involved in Novara so long, that I'd get freaked out by like thinking about politics too much. And what I realized was, you know, as I was just like tripping and walking around and looking at the canals and looking at the water, is that politics was really funny. And I got these 2 straws and like acted out like I'd acted out Theresa May's defeat of the Brexit deal with these like 2 straws for about an hour. I thought it was like the funniest thing on the planet. And that's like, I kind of came out with that and I was like, oh wow. You know, 1, legalize all the drugs. I think they can be very enriching experiences for lots of people. But 2, how sad is it that even when I was tripping and having this, you know, supposed to be an amazing psychedelic experience, all I could think about was the Theresa May administration.
Oh no, that's really sad.
I'm sorry, Ash. I'm sorry what Novara's done to your psychic core.
It was so bad. It was so bad. Like, you know, went on a journey to find myself. Turns out didn't have a self to find.
Yeah.
Next question. Yeah, let's have more sort of joke questions. I like that.
Ooh, Rebecca 3000,
Right.
feelings about Princess Diana. I know there's a lot of those in the environment.
Princess Diana is the only
Who
figure
killed
that
her?
is capable. Okay, look, she's the only figure that at this point in time is capable of uniting Black and brown people in the global South and the diaspora around a common cause. That woman she was exploited, she was undermined, and she was underestimated by the monarchy of this country. And that is why my aunt right? She has never stepped foot in England, can't speak a word of English. She had a photograph of Princess Diana on her like cabinet. It was the only photograph she had of anyone in her room. And anytime she talked to me about Princess Diana, she would like burst into tears. My cousin is called Diana. There's no one in Cairo called Diana. But like after she's named after Princess Diana, like the range this woman has and the glamour is just unbeatable. And I love her.
I think she probably was assassinated because she was going to reveal something about paedophile rings. Because if someone with that status speaks up about the horrific things that were going on in Britain's establishment, it's really difficult to deny. Because normally what they do if someone speaks out against it is either they take them out or they pretend they're crazy. Princess Diana, Jill Dando, they were both people who you could not tarnish as insane, so they had to take them out. It's just
Jill Dando
putting it out there as the most plausible explanation. Jill Dando as well, yeah.
Really?
Think about it. Who are the two characters over the last 20 years who could have... She was Crime Watch. So obviously, there's a connection. She would have found out about it. Princess Diana, at the heart of the elite, would have found out about it. Who are the people who you can't say they're crazy? So
I think it's really...
they're the only two who could have brought truth to light, and so they had to take them out.
Didn't they also have the same hair?
Exactly.
Didn't Jill Dando and Diana have
seems
very
more
similar
than just
hair?
a coincidence.
They're really similar.
I'm not getting into who killed Princess Diana or whether or not the Queen or Prince Philip was in the tunnel. I'm not getting into all of that.
But I wouldn't say any individuals were involved because that could be libelous. I'm just saying in general.
But I wouldn't comment. It is generally held to be true that neither Prince Philip or the Queen were in the tunnel that we know of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Generally held to be true. They've apparently got watertight alibis. I'm staying away from tunnels for the next 2 years after doing the show, by the way. Just like nobody is safe. But what I think about, because I saw there being like a bit of a controversy on Twitter about like, you fucking simps, leftists who are into Princess Diana, like, do you know how hard you're being cooked by the ruling class? Like, cucked or cooked? I could say cooked. Oh, it's cucked. That makes me a real cuck, so I can't even say it right. All right, cooked. when one is being cuckolded by the ruling class, like can you be a leftist and stand Princess Diana? I think that one, there's always this layer of irony, right? So when you talk about the connections between like your ethnic auntie and Princess Diana, there's a level of fondness there which it ranks up with your grandma's refusal to take the plastic off of the sofa. So it's also about memory and like how communities establish themselves in these like kind of weird acts of
yeah, and like I can't justify my grandma not letting me sit on the sofa through a watertight theoretical framework. It's just how she was, and I love her for it.
It's the same thing. But then also, when there are splits in the ruling class, and sometimes these are really big splits in the ruling class, like Brexit or Biden versus Trump, or Princess Diana versus the royal family, sometimes you have to pick a side. You have to pick a side, and it's not good enough to say neither. And when you go, Prince Charles, you pig dog, you led her all around the houses. You got her in the big fucking wedding dress and you were still boning Camilla and calling her every 5 seconds. You've got to take a stance on a conflict within the ruling class. That's what I think.
I mean, I think she was a remarkable woman. And it is strange that she died in those circumstances, given her political activism, given her estrangement from the future King of England, given the fact that she may have had a child with a man who was a Muslim. The idea that a Muslim would be the brother of the King of England, I think it would have been a really remarkable shift. Her work on landmines, her work around HIV/AIDS. And I think the reason why she's loved by so many people is because she appealed to people's highest sentiments, actually. She didn't appeal to sort of, the most debased aspects of the human psychology, like a Nigel Farage. She appealed to the highest ones while having it all. There was no self-interest for her to do these things. You might say she wanted the status. Fine, she could do that with Dancing with John Travolta. She didn't hug people with HIV/AIDS. Well, exactly right. So
Yeah.
I think people hold her in high regard for a very good reason, and I don't think she clearly died in very strange circumstances. Clearly,
But I think you know
and I
what?
think the fact that people talk about that is entirely reasonable.
I think there's a really interesting generational thing going on here about generational norms. So Princess Diana was like of our parents' generation, right? Like roughly that generation. And that generation, which includes like Princess Diana on the one hand and Prince Charles on the other, are a generation of people who got fucked up by their wartime generation parents who like just generally thought that if you display too much love or tenderness or affection to a child, that it would ruin them for life, that you were doing the wrong thing as a parent by parenting them in that way. And you had that next generation of, you know, the Charleses and the Dianas and our parents who were kind of reacting to those norms and either making conscious decisions to move away from them or thinking like, oh, this is actually the right way to do things. This is often something which plays out in gendered ways, but not always. And I think that particularly within the royal family, where you've got the kind of, you know, the values of like, you are so beholden to tradition and stoicism and blah blah. You've got someone like Diana who is like, I don't want to be like that. That's not an experience of family life that I want to continue. That you've got this huge conflict of values. So even if nobody was in the tunnel and it was a accident, there's still, I think, a really interesting social and cultural question about what Diana represented and what she was projecting to the public about changes in values and the values of human connection and affection, contact, hugging, warmth, all that kind of stuff. That's my LRB Diana hot take, my Reddit one, when the tinfoil hat comes out.
I'll be super quick. I also think, Ash, because it was, 1997, you had so many things happening, Stephen Lawrence, Spice Girls, New Labour. It was this really strange sort of confluence of social and cultural moments. And I think you're right. I think for a lot of people whose parents were that wartime generation, real martial values, very sort of stoical, I think for a lot of them, it was almost like it was clearly this outburst of like traumatic energy because they sympathized with somebody who was being so ground down by the same values and by the same the same personality types in a sense. And I think that's entirely right. And I think what she was a rejection of is we forget this, in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, Britain was one of the most warlike countries in the world. There was this incredible martial culture of, you have mass conscription, you have 10% of GDP on defense spending. You still have the idea of like, Britain being this global power. And it was, in many ways, pre-war Britain isn't like that. Actually, early 20th century Britain doesn't have conscription, for instance. People think it's a ridiculous idea. And so there's this period, like you say, from 45 to 65, where a lot of people got really screwed up from a really macho militaristic culture. And I think people saw her reject that and think, thank Christ, yes, it was such a horrible way to live. And so when she dies, I remember when I told my mum, I was about 11 years old, she said, oh, what's happened in the news this morning? I said, oh yeah, Diana's died in Paris. I was like 11, I had no idea. And she was like, no, she like started screaming more than when her own mother died. And I'm thinking, wow, Christ, this is a really remarkable lady who's just died. Well, why is my mum like in floods of tears? But I think clearly, like you say, Ash, she spoke to a shared experience of something. She was a totem for something far, far bigger in a number of ways, right? Both past and present.
Yeah, and you can't disconnect that, I think, from the context again of like what Thatcherism did to like the spirit of this country, where like any kind of like, like this was one of the first women to like talk about having an eating at that stage, to like talk about having experiencing an eating disorder, of like showing connection and empathy for people, people with HIV who had been like categorized as like people who had created their own demise because of their bad lifestyle choices and stuff like that. And it was like to have someone who looked at kind of like being shunted or being, and she always said like I feel connected to people who have been rejected, and like feeling rejected or feeling any kind of vulnerable or needing support at a time that was seen as so, again, like pathetic and weak. of her like embodying those values at the highest level of visibility and also being incredibly glamorous throughout. Something that I personally like to, think is that's, I think, is something that like connected with a lot of people, because people were starved of that. Like, it's okay to like want like human intimacy and connection, and to feel connected to someone that doesn't have to look like you, or doesn't have to give you like an immediate, it doesn't have to be like an immediately transactional relationship. But yeah, like, and she was also snatched, like, let's be real, there's nothing wrong with that.
What do you guys think about doing like a quick fire round?
Yeah, we should get up some more questions, but first of all, you should watch the film by Lily Allen's dad, Keith Allen, on the inquiry into the Diana murder and how the media did not cover it very well at all. Very good documentary. What's the biggest political bone of contention between the staff, or what topic do you debate the most? Ooh, that's a very interesting question. What, me as the issue, good or bad? Michael Walker, yay or nay? Cop or not?
Yeah.
Gary's the cop in Novara Media.
I'll be quick. I don't think we disagree. And I think the question's the wrong way around. I don't think we disagree enough.
I mean,
we disagree tons, Aaron. You just don't notice.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we do. No, we were saying as an organisation we don't have an. I think we agree on a lot of the big questions. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, I think that I've always gotten really frustrated when people have acted like, oh, Novara's position on this. And it's like, we are individual people who like come together through a shared idea of like what we want, what we think there should be a media organization doing. We have like our own things that we are really focused on. We have our things that we're really passionate about. We have our things that we don't necessarily know as much about as other people in the organization. It's like really frustrating that like people kind of like talk about it in that way. But like, yeah, I mean, I think that during like kind of the idea, and these things come into sharp relief when you have like a moment like the election, when it's like, okay, we now have to decide what we think should actually be in a manifesto, or what we think, that brings these things into sharp relief. And I would say, much like the rest of the movements, and the left, like the question of like how, things that are those issues that are designated as culture wars, they're not just cultural issues, obviously, that's my position, but like these kind of, about like what a migration policy should be, what a policing policy would be, is probably kind of an area that we sort of like, in terms of what that should be in a manifesto going into a general election, was maybe an area that we discussed, like we maybe disagreed.
I think we probably agree, but Michael disagrees with the rest of us. But I mean, that's...
Yeah, but now I just think that we tried to put too much in the manifesto.
Marginalise me, go on.
I just think that like we thought that a manifesto should be a reflection of all the things we want to do. Now I don't think that. I think that a manifesto is now a totem for a set of values, things that people can see themselves in. It's not actually about policy, and then you do what you want. And our problem is that we're always debating about what the recipe is. We never just give people the goddamn brownie.
Yeah, but that's a strategic. I think I'm not a prison abolitionist, for example. I think some other people in the organisation are. Who's a prison abolitionist? Aren't you, Dalia? Yeah. So me and Dalia disagree on that. You'll probably notice those, and Ash, you'll notice those tensions on Tisky Sour if you tune in on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m.
Oh wait, so Gary was asking, I'm not sure if you guys can hear Gary, but is this a political compass of like, so what would I'd be libertarian right? That's bollocks.
I'd be like authoritarian right, which is, I'm too lazy for that shit.
I'm libertarian left, which is 100% not which one I am.
You guys fill in the axes.
Right. Big love to you all. Natalie, this is the most exciting event of the year. Me and my partner Jack would like to know what all of your favorite films are.
What a great question.
Easy. Battle of Algiers. Single greatest film ever made. Next question.
Yeah.
Oh, you
amazing.
Are we all just going to nod in agreement? Yeah, Battle of Algiers as well.
I mean, a really unique film. Like, there's nothing like it, you know. And I think that is what is so kind of incredible about it. And you know, given that it was that era of like anti-colonial struggle was such a kind of like key shaping force of like modern history, and there's been so few films in it, is like, you know, that's a conversation for another day. I don't know what my favorite film of all time is. I think that's a really hard question, but like,
Never Been Kissed.
one film that
She's all
I
that.
have been
Come
like
on.
I feel like I have. I don't know. My mind's like a sieve with this kind of stuff. But like, one film that I've actually watched recently that I think is like really incredible. I mean, obviously, just for J-Lo's abs, like Hustlers is like one of my faves. I just think it's an incredible, incredible film, and J-Lo is wow, like incredible in that. But also Cardi B obviously is amazing in that film as well.
So
We also, if you
good.
guys are, yeah, it's just like, I think it's just like a fantastic, fantastic film. And the fact that J-Lo was snubbed at the Oscars is just like why I emotionally divest from like all award shows. But like, a film that I've watched recently that I thought was really incredible. There's a film called Divines, and it's about like these two like young girls in the suburbs of Paris who like get involved in basically like a drug selling ring. But like, it's just like a really, really, really fantastic exploration of like, you know, I think we think about like French cinema as like this really kind of like bougie, like whatever pretentious thing. And it's like, we rarely see that side of Paris like represented. And I think that it's just like a really, really good film. So that's just not my favorite film of all time, but a really good film I've seen recently.
I don't think we did, because you think you've got La Haine, you've got, I've probably pronounced it wrong. Is it Lan? I don't know. I
don't know what them French people
La
are up
Haine,
to.
you've got Girlhood, you've got like, I think a solid canon of French cinema, which is like Les Banlieues, you know?
Yeah, I think I just like, there was something about this one that just like felt like it was from a different cinematic eye. I don't know, like, I just thought, yeah. Also, I'm acting here like I'm some kind of film buff when actually all I do is just like routinely exhaust J-Lo's oeuvre like over and over and over again. So yeah. But also Dumpling was a good film as well, because I love Jennifer Aniston as a pageant mum. That was like, I was just like, I just want her to constantly play these roles forever.
Yeah. No, I think I could give you three. I think Luchino Visconti, The Leopard. This beautiful schmaltzy film about the Risorgimento, unification of Italy, and about a revolution, effectively, a political and cultural revolution, and how the elite weather the storm. Everything must change for everything to stay the same. I think Godfather 2, amazing film. And then again, schmaltzy film, not, you know, this is going to lose me sort of brownie points as any kind of aficionado. It's a Wonderful Life, Frank Capra, James Stewart. It gets me every time. And effectively, It's a Wonderful Life is about communism. And I find it remarkable it was made in a period of clear, huge anti-communism in Hollywood. But it is about, the real value in life is about social connections and friendships. And that's far more important than monetary worth and so on. And a home is about the place you build with friends and family more than anything else. And so I think those are my top three films, yeah.
I'll go for Battle of Algiers. I think that all glues us together. Thelma and Louise and My Beautiful Laundrette will be my three.
Michael, who would play you in a film of your life? Because I think we could just shave Ben Affleck and put glasses on him.
Ben Affleck.
That's a compliment.
Well, he'd have to... No, that's fine. That's fine. Don't they have to be... They have to be younger than me. Don't they have to be younger than me?
We'll do the Irishman thing.
Because otherwise they'd have to be playing me in the future.
Rami Malek for Aaron.
Gary just said Rami Malek. I'll take that. Yeah, sick. But then I don't want people to be disappointed when they actually meet me.
Me and Dalia are just waiting for more brown actresses to come through, so we've got some choice. Because otherwise it's just Frida Pinto and Halle Berry. That's it.
You want people to be pleasantly surprised when you turn up to the bar. So you want it to be, someone who's a couple of notches, like attractive enough that people are like, yeah, I'll go on the date, but not so attractive that when you arrive, they're like, oh, I thought you were going to be more like Rami Malek. Let's get some more questions up.
Next question.
Mega V, are you vegan? Why? Why not? Okay, we'll take it in turns.
Listen, I come from a household where I remember I had a vegetarian friend round for dinner, and I'd like explain to my mum, like, so this person's a vegetarian, like she doesn't eat meat, and she was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I'll make her tuna salad, and I was just like, okay, right, let's go. So I personally, I mean, my position on like meat eating is I don't think that it is like, I think that the meat industry is like a fucking SOS, and it's one of like the most horrible industries environmentally and ethically. But I don't think that like we have to get to a position where like no one eats meat. I think that like we should be looking towards, expanding like the like food options and expanding the accessibility of food so that people are not as reliant on eating like on meat, because meat is obviously like super cheap and like filling and easy, like especially if you're kind of like trying to feed like multiple mouths. So I think like moralism on meat eating is like a really like shit strategy, but like the way that I look at it is like, and the politics of food is like super important here, and the politics of like food distribution and food access is like a whole thing in itself that I'm not an expert on. But like we should be able to like reduce our dependency on meat, but like I'm not kind of like in a position where I think that like any meat eating is like bad, because I'm like, well, you're just kind of, yeah, that's not I don't think that's right for me.
I'm a bad person and I do bad things. Next.
I think eating meat is clearly morally wrong. I think given the way it's produced, it probably is evil, objectively. It's also very tasty. And so you're raised in a certain... No, but it's true. And you're raised in a certain culture where it's normalized. And I mean, of course, if you were building the sort of perfect society from the bottom up, yeah, of course, you wouldn't eat anywhere near as much meat as we do. Like my grandmother, if I said, oh, yeah, this person's a vegetarian, they'd be like, okay, I'll make some chicken. Like, so it's for them, it's like red meat. I think realistically, we shouldn't be in fully automated luxury communism, which you can buy for your loved ones this Christmas. Go to verso.com. I talk about the fact we could, I think it's very likely we'll move towards different kinds of meat over the course of the next 10 years. The idea that a vegan diet is sufficient for optimal health is probably not correct. At the same time, I think it's quite obvious that a vegan diet is morally superior. It's a better way to live. And also, we don't have enough biocapacity for everybody to eat the kinds of meat that we take for granted in Europe and North America. So clearly that's the first point. But I'll finish with this. A vegan who eats loads of like chocolate, dark chocolate and coffee, they're not, also the CO2 emissions and the water used for those kinds of crops is also huge. So you might not be eating meat, you might be feeling very virtuous, but it could be actually you have a bigger carbon footprint than somebody who just eats chicken once a week. So ideally, we would have meat without animals, cellular agriculture. We will get there, comrades. I talk about it in the book. You should read it if you haven't already. Verso.com.
I agree with the cellular agriculture. Very good chapter and a very good book. I think vegans are morally right. I do. I'm against unnecessary suffering, and I do think the meat industry involves a lot of unnecessary suffering. At the same time, I have a very weak constitution, and nearly every vegan protein source gives me unbearable indigestion. so for that reason,
he's like, for the good of society and carbon emissions.
Well, that's why
it is a better decision for me.
Yeah, probably create more methane than otherwise, to be honest. So I'm waiting for the lab grown meat to come around so that I don't have to choose between mass slaughter or the few hours that follow my eating chickpeas, which isn't very comfortable. I try to not eat cow products because they are particularly environmentally. When I say try not to, I mean like. I still eat burgers sometimes, but I try to aim for the not cow products. Sam Lau, what's on your dream guest list on Novara Media?
We have one each.
Yeah, one each.
Are you going to start with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric Hansen.
Come to me last.
I would like to nominate Ash and Barack Obama.
What? Yeah, that would be
As a
really
sort of like
interesting.
Piers Morgan, you know, like I think that would be, you could play the Piers Morgan clip at the beginning, and then I think that would be like a really great, well, one bit of viral content, but also I think Ash's questions with Obama would be very good.
So, I mean, I think mine like would be probably the writer that has influenced me the most. Noel Sardowi is an Egyptian like feminist and writer, and I think just because like she's lived at the front line of political struggle through so many, like through Nasserism, through the introduction of neoliberalism into Egypt through Sadat, through Hosni Mubarak, through the like 2011 revolution. And it's like, this is someone who like was imprisoned under Sadat and then like is still at the age of like 90, was like running around Tahrir Square, like on the back of a motorbike. And I just think that to have someone with that like lifespan and involvement at the front line of political struggle is like such a unique, she's a fucking archive. And we need to we need to have like their understanding, the analysis and the memory that they've built from that on record. And I think this really struck me when Darkest How died, was I was just like, these people with this incredible institutional like memory and who have been there at so many meaningful historical moments, like, you know, they're going, and we need to like connect them to this generation of activists and just this generation of people before, so that we're not starting from scratch. So I think she would probably be my ideal guest.
Silvio Berlusconi.
I'll just say I've changed my mind. Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ooh.
Oh my god!
Ooh.
It's pronounced Ghislaine, by the way. That's what I've learned, is that it's not Ghislaine, it's Ghislaine.
I would call her Ghislaine.
Ghislaine.
I think Cantona's a better guest.
Yeah, I mean Cantona I think is a phenomenal guest, but I think for me,
if you read the transcripts
Berlusconi.
of Ghislaine Maxwell's interviews, actually she's a terrible interviewee. She's got good legal advice and she gives very evasive answers. So I'd actually
but
Silvio
we'd have to be saying that this person would answer as honestly as they've got the capability to do. Whereas for me, Berlusconi's interesting. He's kind of the blueprint for Trump in lots of ways, and thinking about the kind of like flagrant disregard for democratic norms, and how that happens. And also like, how does one become Silvio Berlusconi? He's a character, and there was decades of layering to make that character happen. He would be someone who I would absolutely love to interview. Another person that, like, the people who I really want to interview aren't people that I admire. They're people who I think create the world that we're still living in some way. My ideal, obviously, she's dead now, but my ideal would be Margaret Thatcher. I still think that we're living in Thatcher's Britain. She would be somebody who I'd love to interview. Failing that, David Blunkett, actually. I think that the blueprint for, you know, what the Home Office is supposed to do in lots of ways is established by David Blunkett. I think that, you know, Theresa May, in lots of ways, there's a continuation of Blunkett's vision for the Home Office. So the people that I would like to interview, presuming they would answer me honestly, are never people who I consider my comrades.
Right.
Michael?
Okay. I think I'd quite like Gordon Brown, because I feel like he was such a central character in the New Labour years, but also was the one who seemed like he had a moral compass. I don't know if there'd be that much point in interviewing Tony Blair, but I think Gordon Brown would be super interesting. Also, he never really got grilled on his responsibility for the Iraq War, in the sense that he was the one person who, if he had sort of said, I'll resign, could have stopped it. And I think he kind of has got off a little bit lightly on that. There was a question that came across on the bottom. Let's get it back again. Monwan Cagrino. I want to get into political journalism, but have no idea where to start. Any advice?
I mean, we don't know either. That's why we're here.
We don't. Wrong people. I mean, I would. Go on.
Oh, very quickly, I've got some advice. Look, I've had one. No, tell a lie. I've had 3 job interviews in my life, but 2 didn't really count because they were for academic positions. But for a sort of political journalism-y job, I had 1 job interview, and I got through to the final 2. And I think they ended up going with like a privately educated white guys for a very well-regarded publication, and I would have, at that time, I thought that like me working as an editorial intern was like the be all and end all. And in the end, they turned me down because I was too senior for an intern role, but too junior and inexperienced for anything above that. So I was in that like cut-off place. And I thought that rejection at the time, it felt like that was a comment on my value, and that my value was irredeemably shit because it had been rejected for this thing and I'd gotten so close. And then what I realized is that so many of these institutions, including this very well-regarded publication, right through to, you know, huge outlets like the BBC, Channel 4, they think that they know what it means to be challenged. And so they've got this incredible self-regard of, we want somebody who's going to be a rebel, someone who's going to be, you know, an idiosyncratic thinker, somebody who's going to challenge us. But it's within really, really tight constraints. And usually those constraints are inherently politicized. So I could be a woman of color entering those spaces as long as I'm a centrist. You can be a radical leftist entering those spaces as long as you're privately educated and you're white. You know, you can be a hardline Tory and get anywhere in this life as long as you say you also listen to Skepta, right? What it means to defy expectations within those things are so, so limited. And if you want to get into political journalism, well, it's really obvious what you do. Either be rich or be amenable. But if you're neither of those things, if you're neither rich and you're not amenable, my advice is do your own thing. Respect the craft. I think that one of the things that we should really look into in this part of expanding our you know, reporting and investigative capacity is that having journalism qualifications, training and reporting and organic news gathering is something that would really strengthen our organizations. So definitely have respect for the craft. But do I think that that upper echelon of political editors at ITV, at the BBC, are there because they take ideas seriously? Do I think they're there because they're smart? Do I think they're there because they add a valuable voice which improves the public sphere? No! They're there by virtue of their class and their connections. And so if you've got neither of those things, but you want to set a political agenda, the worst thing you could do is decide that you are going to follow the career path of Robert Peston or Laura Kuenssberg or whoever it is. They're not there because they're agenda setters. They're there because they reinforce a line which is amenable to those in power, and they've got the right class background.
So true. But Ash, do you remember what I said to you when you got that rejection?
I think you bought me a drink.
I think I said they're fucking idiots. They've made the biggest mistake this year. You're going to be huge. And I was right and they were wrong.
They sent me an email, actually, like 2 years later. The guy who had sent me the rejection sent me an email 2 years later, literally going, I feel so embarrassed by what happened.
You should. You should feel ashamed.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, I guess the thing was, and this was the powerful thing, Gary's WhatsApping me going, who was it? I'm not going to say just in case I ever want to get paid.
Classy and professional. You shouldn't say it. No.
But he sent me an email a couple of years later, and I didn't really know how to reply to it because obviously at the time, if I'd have read that email, it would have meant the world to me. And 2 years later, it didn't mean a thing. And the thing that I wanted to say, like, the person who you did wrong doesn't exist anymore because their values have changed. Do you know what I mean? And I actually feel glad that my values have changed because I think now if I was going into the spaces that I do, I mean, you know, I was doing a thing for Radio 4 this week and I was hearing everyone shrilling, you know, the way that they do in the green room. Someone did a witticism and someone else literally said, how wrong? And I think that had I gone down that path of being an editorial intern at that place, I would have had a much more powerful sense of imposter syndrome of, oh God, I have to be like these people if I want to be successful. Whereas now I've got a certain faith in what I know and what I don't know. And I can look at that and go, oh my God, I don't rate that. I don't want to be like that. You people are ridiculous.
I think, that's what I love about Novara so much, is it just does feel so distinct to everything else in the British landscape at the moment. And I think that's right, Ash. I think probably the best thing that ever happened to you was being rejected from there, which partially answers this question, which is, what do I want to do? Yeah, don't take rejection badly, and actually do your own thing. I would say, independent of that, focus on a particular area of expertise and get really, really good at it. Have a really distinctive voice on a particular policy area or theme or country. And I think that will serve you very well. I think if you've got integrity, if you have professional craft and skill, and if you have a distinct area of expertise, I think generally speaking, you're going to be okay. But Ash is right. You also have to be alive to the constraints, the ideological constraints, the socio-economic constraints about the journalism industry. And the reality is, you cannot be idiosyncratic, you cannot be working class, and you certainly can't have kind of dissenting views or be from an ethnic minority. Heaven forbid all these things together and expect to get to the very top, because you won't, right? And that's the point. And diversity is purely, for many people, sadly, purely performative. Like Ash says, you can be brown, but if you're brown and you're a socialist, forget it. If you're black and you think that actually the organization's cleaning staff should be paid a living wage and they're not, forget it. And you bring that up, no chance. So be alive to that, but also, don't be depressed about it. This is about your generation, future generations taking things in a positive direction. That's not easy, but it's really important. And that's nowhere more valuable and necessary than in media.
All right, Gaz is saying one or two more questions. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say on the advice, because I feel a bit bad for us saying, like, we don't know. Because in a way, I mean, we don't really know how to become professional reporters in mainstream organizations because none of us have done it. But there is still, YouTubers talking about politics and explaining it in ordinary language. It's not a particularly crowded market. Like, if you look at America, you've got a whole universe of YouTubers who are speaking really articulately in ordinary language to people, because there's a real sort of thirst for this kind of argument. So I would say, if what you want to do is become a reporter at a mainstream organization, or become a reporter and apply for when Novara is in future, employing reporters, absolutely do that. But also, if what you want to do is explain your ideas, explain your thoughts on YouTube, then do it. Just make your channel, try and make it engaging. If you want advice, my DMs are open. Feel free to send your first videos and we can give some feedback, because we want to build up a much bigger, YouTube universe of people who are articulating left-wing politics in like a brilliant way. So I think, sit in front of a camera, probably 5 people will watch the first one, but maybe, if you put out videos regularly, one of them will take off, and then that will, will grow from there.
Yeah. And I also I wouldn't consider myself like a political journalist, because I think that's a really particular, like, serious set of skills that are not the things that I would think of myself more as like a researcher in terms of like my actual like skill set. But like the same thing applies, which is that it takes time to craft your voice. Like the first thing you do, the first thing you write, the first video you make, the first thing you do is going to sound grating and unpolished and all of that, but it's through doing, and it's through kind of like actually engaging in the real thing that you want to do, and having mistakes and having kind of like things that you sort of look back at and you're just like, like it takes time to craft that voice. And so it's like, give yourself the time and the space and the self-forgiveness to craft that. And that's the thing given this, what the thing that Ash has outlined, that you're not going to have an automatic ticket to like the top of, because of who you are or your politics and whatever, but so what you will get is what will get you there is your voice, and give yourself the patience and the time to develop that and figure out what that is.
I think that's good advice.
That was a good section.
Ooh,
The narrator Grimm.
can you all name something that gives you hope for the future?
For the future.
All right, name something that gives you hope for the future. Michael, you go first. You've been quite quiet.
Ooh, that's putting me on the spot there. Something that gives me hope for the future. Let's say, I mean, I'm sure if I thought about this, for longer, I could think of something that's more original, but something that's sort of very immediate to me is that, whilst the Corbyn project in many ways ended in tears, it also has brought into politics and into people who now have a platform and who are connected to people. And you see it in Young Labour, you see it in local Labour parties around the country, that you now do have a whole generation of young activists who are interested in how you could, take the state and implement policies that make people's lives better. So even though sometimes it can seem like in the very short term, left-wing politics in this country is a little bit hopeless, what I think is that the next time a sort of Corbyn moment arises, there is going to be a much richer ecology of people who are ready to, take that opportunity and really go forward with it with a level of sort of like, not just competency, but also, awareness of how we will be attacked, and awareness of how to respond to that, and awareness of how to engage with people. So I do feel like what the Corbyn moment has left behind is still, full of potential. And that will be lots of people who watch this show, lots of people who we get on this show. So I do feel like we're surrounded by things that give me hope about sort of like what politics could look like in this country in the near future. In terms of, on a global level, I have to think a little bit more about that. Who's next?
I'll go on, Dalia.
I mean, I think for me is that, like, when I get very sort of like bogged down, and like, especially kind of when you feel like the forces against kind of like you pushing out, the you pushing towards the world that you want to see becomes so loud and are so resourced and are so kind of like everywhere. I think what gives me hope is like this kind of, and I don't know if this is like a kind of, and something we don't talk enough about on the left, is like this kind of spirituality of like the seeds that you kind of plant bloom a lot later. And just because you don't see it in the immediate aftermath, and often it looks like a massive loss, if you look historically, it's always been in, the years after that it kind of like that little thing that you contributed was part of a piece of something that with lots of other people in parts of the world that you might never have gone to or never known about, all have like done the same thing at the same time, kind of like comes together and creates something that you might never see and you might never connect to what you did, but it's there. And I think that kind of spiritual like thing is really, it's the only thing, because it's like you might feel like you're always losing the short-term stuff, but the seed that you're planting is blooming. It just might not be exactly where you see it or in your lifetime.
I'm worried now because I'm really struggling to keep my new plants alive. So now I'm but don't
everything I touch actually dies. So
I mean, my hope for the future is one day I'll die and this will all be over. But
Can I say, for me, I think Michael was right. I think the elections for Young Labour recently were really good. And that's not because Labour is the future of British politics or whatever, but it was the calibre of the people that were being elected. You're talking people in their early 20s who are very sharp, who are very open people, have real integrity, have good, obviously, I think, political positions. And if I look at somebody like Jess Barnard in Young Labour, or I look at somebody like Lara McNeil, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them on every issue, but those kinds of people weren't entering formal left-wing politics 5 years ago. A young woman who's also a junior NHS doctor who's on the Labour Party NEC. And that, I think, is a really instructive moment. Now, the thing is, Labour over the last 80 years has been incredibly good at keeping those people out of elected office. Incredibly good. And, I've named two names that there's thousands of people just like that. And there'll be more coming through now, generation after generation. The question is, will they be able to change things at a real macro level within the Labour movement, within British culture generally? Of course, Novara has a role to play in that as well. But I think that to me is a sort of representation of what the future could look like for left-wing politics in this country.
I think we're going to do a quick fire round where we get one each. They're going to come along. Should we assign them first?
Yalla, Gary.
They'll come up. Rebellious Truth, CEO of, we can't see the whole name. How do you convert non-leftists? Who wants it?
Thirst traps and acid. Next question.
First traps and acid. Next question.
Come on, Gary.
Yes, the quick fire round means the questions have to come quickly.
Free Gary.
I think Gary's done a great job tonight. Can I just say, technically, great job,
Yeah.
Gary. Well done.
Yeah, good.
Also, I heard
And
someone
for
on
the
Twitter
last
say
until
that
now.
they
4
didn't
years.
think that Gary was a real person. That they thought that we'd made up Gary as like a totem of something.
Okay, you're going to
Where
have
are
to get up
Michael's
the next
glasses
question
from?
soon because this one's really quick to answer. They're from Specsavers. I mean, that's what can I say? They're from Specsavers. not every Specsavers shop.
Okay,
has
all
them
right.
because
Funniest behind the scenes moment.
There's a lot.
Oh,
Aaron
I
getting
don't know.
threatened with a libel case every 2 weeks has got to be up there.
That's not true. I've been threatened with libel in my life 4 times. Once by Linton Crosby, and obviously nothing came of it because what I said was true. But behind the scenes moment for Novara. Oh my god, that's a really deep question. Funniest behind the scenes moment. What do you think, Ash?
The thing is that you kind of can't remember them because you don't even register them as behind the scenes. You
I've got
think
it.
of it as like your mates. Yeah, go on.
I've got it. It's well, we'll answer this in a second. Why did Michael not match me on Hinge?
Why did you not match Ankesh Shah on Hinge, Michael?
Oh, I don't know who you are, so I can't say why.
Do you have a
In terms of the
It's not. I'm not explaining.
yeah,
my
the funniest
type on
moment I think
live
for
on
me was
YouTube.
probably the first TWT where we did loads of live stuff, and Gary, that was kind of Gary's baptism of fire, and we almost broke him as a human being. I think if people saw the tremendous pressure Gary was under, I mean, that was kind of amazing. But he came through.
He's been trying to quit ever since.
Why is that funny?
Gary's like in our
Where's
ears
that
going,
white-
that wasn't funny. That was actually incredibly
Oh,
distressing, Aaron.
No.
Yeah, it was kind of like I think there's a veneer. You know, in Italian you say sprezzatura, which is like the duck. It's above the water. It's very graceful, but then beneath it's like the feet are flapping away, and that was effectively there was Ash looking great in front of camera, and there's Gary sort of having a kind of he didn't have a meltdown. Actually, he did tremendously well. Next question. And he's saying he did have a meltdown.
Can you spill the tea on any Novara romances? Well,
Oh, are we allowed to?
Wow.
No, that's unprofessional.
I'm not interested. I'm not interested in telling anybody else's secrets. But what I will say is that when we started to professionalize the organization and we were moving from being volunteers to being paid, I half jokingly suggested we should have a strict no banging clause, right? That we should have a no banging clause. Nobody bangs each other. We survive as an organization. We all seek comfort elsewhere. And then I had like a couple of different people come to me and go, too late. So that's all I'm going to say is that I was trying to introduce some God-fearing values into this organization and I failed.
We had
I will
another
not say
question.
who did what.
My lips are sealed.
The other question was
Yeah, that
football
question-
teams
always
or
done,
any other
yeah.
kind of teams that you support.
Which football team? Garrett, Michael, Ash, Dalia. Which football teams do you support? Michael.
Tottenham Hotspur.
So my partner will kill me if I say anything other than Tottenham. But my team in Egypt is Al Ahly, who just won the league like last night. So that was a fun night in my household. The Red Devils, they're called.
Yeah, I supported Sheffield Wednesday because my dad did, but there's nothing to kill your interest in football like supporting Sheffield Wednesday. So that's my answer.
Asa?
Something about merch.
I
Azza, yeah.
I
Who do you support?
supported growing up, I supported Man United because my dad was a Man United fan, but Bournemouth as well. I used to sometimes go to Bournemouth matches. But what's interesting is Bournemouth going to the Premier League, and I only watched them once away at Crystal Palace, which was very fun because we won.
Oh, that's a great question. Aaron, can you explain the context behind the pic of you sat in handcuffs on a bus?
I was arrested at a BNP demo. I was never charged. And I went down there at the last minute. I had my bag with me and it had my entire PhD in it. I had my computer, had my field notes. It was completely unrelated to the protest. I think I went down there after going to the library one weekend on a Saturday afternoon. And obviously the police I knew I was going to lose all my notes in my computer. Actually, the police gave it back, which was surprising after like 2 weeks. So that was me feeling like, okay, I've just lost like maybe 6 months of my PhD here. That's why I look so glum.
Can we make it very clear that you were not at the BNP demonstration as a member of the BNP? I was at this demonstration too, not as a member.
I didn't even deserve to be arrested, right? I didn't do any de-arrest, nothing. I was just literally standing there, and which is why there was because Westminster is obviously chock-a-block with high definition CCTV, and I honestly think they were making up the numbers. They'd already brought the buses by that point, so I think they should just fill them up. I should have gone.
Ash was just asking you to confirm you were in the BNP, not to protest your innocence of whatever the police had charged you for.
I remember it really well. I remember it really, really well because Aaron showed up on his bicycle, and it had been not that long after a different protest-related arrest, and so Aaron was being super, super careful. And he showed up in a crisp, ironed white shirt, and I think it was like brown leather shoes. And I remember because I was just like, what the hell are you doing turning up to a protest dressed like, you're about to, intern at Goldman Sachs and you're just on your way to the All Bar One. What is this? And then you got nicked straight away. And I remember like looking up at you and I was like, oh mate, you would literally been there for 2 minutes or something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Bike, got nicked. And then we were like, oh, Aaron.
Hadn't done anything. I literally hadn't done anything. I should have got compensation, but I was just so traumatized by the police at that point. So I don't want to have anything to do with you. Just leave me alone. I should have gone for it.
Yeah, no, you really did do nothing. Oh, Desert Island Disc. So are we doing like one album that
I think it's songs
would take with you? And listen, do I look like Lauren Laverne to you? I've never listened to Desert Island Discs.
Okay, yeah, you get 5 songs, but I think we're gonna get one song each.
One song
each. I feel like it's easier for me to do an album than a song.
That's why you have to pick a song.
I'm sorry.
This
show
was never for easy questions.
Desert Island Disc.
I would say when I'm in my house, because this is difficult. When I'm in my house, I mainly listen to like Ariana Grande, Adele, that kind of stuff. But I'm not sure I want to take that on an island with me. So the other day I was listening to Nina Simone. I was like, this is actually really, this is kind of one up from Ariana Grande, isn't it? So I'd probably take "Do What You Got to Do" by Nina Simone. Very, very deep, moving, tragic song.
YG, Twist My Fingers.
So my one,
I don't even know that song.
No, YG, Twist My Fingers. Oh, so good. So good.
I'll look it up.
It makes me feel the most mischievous motherfucker on the planet every time I listen to it.
I mean, my one is always like Nina Simone is like my favorite artist of all time. So I am also going to pick a Nina Simone. Like, if it was an album, it would be Nina Simone Sings the Blues, which is like an incredible, like 12-song album that is just like covers politics, horniness, being like traumatized, being in love, being heartbroken, being like, it's just everything. It's like
that's
she
like
covers
a day
every
in the
shade
life of a Pisces, you know?
Yeah, like it's every shade of human emotion is like a human experience is covered. But if I had to pick one song from her, it would be her cover of I Shall Be Released, which just like brings me to tears every time. But also makes me feel very connected.
Keith Starmer or 30 to 50 Feral Hogs? I think that the PLP could
I think it depends
overpower
on
him,
whether
you know?
it's 30 or 50, right? I think the tipping point's about 35. What did you say, Ash?
I tried to do a witticism that the 30 to 50 feral hogs was referring to the PLP.
Shut up, front bench.
That's very droll. Ooh.
Well, it would be
One
the
thing to
Socialist
say is
Campaign
actually-
Group, wouldn't it? But then we'd be calling them...
Jeremy Corbyn is a lot
Hogs,
more
then.
ripped than he's like a really. I think that's where this enmity actually comes from, is the fact that Keir Starmer isn't in the best shape, and Jeremy
And
Corbyn
Corbyn
is
is
like
ripped.
15 years older, and he's like
It's
really
that
ripped.
Jeremy Corbyn can lift and Keir Starmer.
Yeah. He's really
Would
like
you
a really
rather fight
ripped
100
guy.
duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
Wait, I missed that.
Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
100 duck-sized horses. I'd actually,
Yeah.
because they can't, if they could fly, I'd actually prefer to fight 100 duck-sized horses than 100 ducks. So yeah, I'm gonna just kick away the 100 duck-sized horses.
What's my motivation
Or
here?
climb
Have
a
they done
tree.
anything to me or my family?
They're just
I
trying
can't
to fight
even
you.
fight one
Self-defense.
duck-sized duck. Ducks are fucking vicious. So anything
They
that's
can
not
fly
Yeah.
though. They're difficult. These are horses, so they can't fly. You can just climb a tree.
Gary, should we end the show?
I think 2 hours is good.
Yeah,
We should
I mean,
do this more
also,
often, though. It's really fun.
I'm up for it. We could
It's a
do
nice Sunday
once
evening,
a month.
isn't it?
Once a month on a Sunday.
It'd be quite sweet, yeah.
Also, I'm so hungry.
I learned a lot about you guys doing this.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a
I've just
lot.
realised I don't actually want to take the saddest song I know onto an island with me as the only song. So I think I'm changing my mind. Because that's a downer, isn't it? I'd take something like Egyptian Hold You or something, so I'd just be in like a constant good mood.
Aaron, what would yours be? Would it be EDM? Something by David Guetta.
Well, given Michael's logic, probably that's wise, isn't it? But I think probably the Goldberg variations.
Mate, I'm going to be on a different
Goldberg
island
variation.
for sure.
Or something by like Janisek.
Aaron on his
Maybe.
own on an island listening to Unts music.
Yeah. Oh no, Gigi D'Agostino. You know that Gigi D'Agostino? It's like still huge in Italy 25 years later. Everybody still listens to it all the time.
I don't
Gigi
know,
D'Agostino.
bro. Where do you see Novara in 5 years' time? Still doing this AMA? Probably.
I thought
Yeah,
Gary was
we'll
just
still
saying,
be
should we
live.
wrap up?
Yeah, Gary, if we're wrapping up, we're wrapping up.
Well, the secret is Gary wants to do more long-form documentaries, so I think he found a very strategic question to end on. If Gary wants to do
Okay, let's end
with
long-form
that question then.
documentaries, he can do long-form documentaries.
Can we have Gary on the next Ask Me Anything? Because I've got so many questions
Yeah,
for
we'll get
Gary,
Gazza
and I
on the
feel
next
that this
one.
would be the only forum in which he'd answer them.
For sure.
Gary said no.
It's not happening.
No, Gary said
happening.
yes. In
Not
my earpiece, Gary said yes. I will be on the next Ask Me Anything, dancing the dance of the 7 veils. In fact, he said. Can confirm.
5 years time,
We can
Novara will
make
be
it
it will be
Get
the
us to like
biggest.
1 million subs, and Gary
Yeah.
will do.
No, that's a good thing,
A
yeah.
solo AMA, just Gary in the audience.
Yeah.
There are Gary stands
Yeah, what-
actually out there. They're a hardcore group.
No, justifiably. Look at him.
The thing is, they can't
5
look at
years,
him.
what I
One
said
They
is-
don't know
man
what Gary looks like.
infrastructure.
Oh, that's-
At the moment,
there
we're
are some
good at
people that
making
know-
sense of politics.
you know how
for
good-looking
people.
Gary is.
But what I want us to do is be digging up dirt and making the lives of politicians super difficult. That's one thing that I really want to be doing in 5 years' time. That at the moment we're not doing. To
We
make
do a
that
bit.
happen. Yeah, but
That's
to
mostly
really
through
make them. I
cyberbullying.
want to bring down a politician. A bad
I mean,
one,
we've
not for the
we
sake
brought,
of it, obviously.
we brought down a general secretary this year, but okay. I mean, we're doing okay. We started doing that this year, but I agree. I want people to go, Novara Media have just released a story about you. And they go, oh God, who is it? Yeah, I get it.
Right, can we go now? Because my boyfriend's making a stir fry.
Oh.
Oh,
I'm
sounds
hungry.
nice.
wholesome.
Yeah, no, it's with leftovers.
Yeah.
It's with leftovers from what I cooked on Friday. It's not even that sexy. But I'm hungry. Have I said that I'm
All right,
hungry?
you know how we're going to wrap up.
Go
We've
on,
got to say
Michael,
thank
take
you
it
to our
away.
audience for their committed support and for getting us to 100,000 subscribers. Here is to the next 100,000 subscribers, which we want to get, within a year. We want to get big super quickly. Big up to all the Novara media team. Big up to Gary, who's in the background now. Especially big up to James Fox, Tisky Sour producer, who's very much, obsessed with the YouTube subscribers with a scientific obsession, which I very much endorse.
It's like a mad professor.
Yeah, Aaron Bastani, Dalia Gebrial, Ash Sarkar. It's so nice to have the whole family here. I just look at you like, oh, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All together.
We don't even have names to you.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's good to see you Monday. Thank you so much for your questions. And I agree, Aaron, I've learned a lot more about everyone during this, so we will do this more often, eh?
For sure.
I mean, what I learned is that we're all so much less deep than we've given each other
We're
credit
all
for.
himbos.
Yeah, still, I'll
All
take that.
himbos.
The highest point of
All right.
evolution.
Let's wrap up.
See you all, everyone.
You've been watching the 100,000k 100k subscribers. Ask Me Anything YouTube special. We'll be back for more. We need more, but hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I imagine most of you watching this have. For now, thank you. Ash, Dalia, Aaron, Gary. You've been watching Novara Media. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m.